Hi, it's Alex at ADV Newbie and welcome back to the channel. First of all, huge apologies, I've not posted any content for a long time. That's for a lot of reasons, but hopefully I'm back now. And the reason I'm back, and the actual incentive to get back, was because I've actually changed one of my bikes. So you've seen a lot of films on the KTM 890 Adventure R and my trials with that and the weight of it and trying to learn how to ride it. I mean, for those of you that know me, I started to learn to ride off-road on British green roads and green lanes about 3 years ago. So I'm not skilled, I've not ridden all my life, and this is my story about how I find things and how I learn things. So the exciting new thing here is the Kove 450 Rally. I've been researching this bike and I'd seen it about probably a year ago and been looking at the advertisements and seeing what it was all about, and then went to the Adventure Bike Festival in June this year and met a great guy called John Stone who was on his Kove stand, and he introduced me to these bikes. Now, the reason these bikes are interesting is they're market disruptors. They are shooting hard at the big boys of the KTMs, the Ducatis, the BMWs, and I guess the question is, are they doing a good job on that? They've produced a 450 rally bike, single cylinder, which they have entered into several Dakar rallies and completed, which is no mean feat. And then they've brought this model to the road and to the UK. So what I really want to do is have a look at this bike, come up with my views as a very mediocre older rider. I'm not a Chris Birch, I'm not a young, fit, non-breakable person. I'm a person that breaks. I realise my limitations, but I do really enjoy what I do. So let's take a look at the bike and I'll come back to you in a bit. So we're here in lovely East Devon today, and that's on the south coast of the UK, and it's a beautiful area. We've got some amazing lanes around here, some of which can be quite challenging. There's a lot of mud, there's a lot of tree roots, but it's a perfect territory for the Kove. And one of the reasons I went for this bike is it's so much lighter than the KTM 890 that I had. I did it, I struggled with it at times, I did struggle with the weight at times, and it was quite a steep learning curve to try and get used to that. So getting a lighter bike, and it's probably 100 kilos lighter than the KTM was, but also it's half the power, which is quite significant, but it doesn't feel it. This is the bike that I wanted for this type of environment and this type of riding. And I think before, when I had the 1290 Super Adventure R, which I still have, and the 890 Adventure R, they were too similar in weight and style and type of bike. So I've got rid of the 890. And this is the one that's taken its place, the Kove 450. I've had it for about 5 months now, but not managed to get out a huge amount, and I'm just riding it a lot more over the last few weeks. Now, let's have a little chat about some of the modifications I've done based on the feedback I've heard from the internet. So I'm sure anyone who's heard anything about the Kove 450 Rally will have heard about the low down jerkiness, the transmission shunt on it, and the fact that the feeling low down is really quite snatchy and grabby. And I must say I agree with it. When I first got the bike and rode it for the first time, it really was quite a shock. I went and did some lanes that I'm used to on the 890, and it felt really alien, but it also felt really hard work and really quite unpleasant. So I got a lot of advice and a lot of research from people on forums, and just worked out, what do I need to do here to make this bike more smooth and easier to ride. Now, one of the big things here is that this is a bike that does need some running in. It's that single cylinder 450 engine, and it did feel incredibly stiff and tight right at the start. I'm gradually finding that over time that is really improving and loosening up. So I suspect there's an element of the engine just loosening up on its own anyway, but there are quite a few modifications that people have done to try and improve that lower down in the rev range performance. So what have we done on this bike? I started off initially getting the Kuba ECU, and that did seem to improve things a little bit. The low down fueling was a little bit better and it was a little bit more enjoyable to ride, but I suspect that's confounded as well by the fact the bike was still pretty new and still running itself in and getting smoother. So whether I swap things around too early, I'm not sure, but I did carry on with all the bits of advice that I'd heard and had some amazing bits of input from John Stone at Konrad Motokonnection, but also James Brown at Kove UK, and they've been immensely helpful with getting this bike to the point where it is really enjoyable to ride. So in terms of what I've done to it, I had the 12-tooth front sprocket put onto the bike, and that really lowers the gearing, much more so than putting a slightly bigger sprocket on the back wheel. That does make it a little bit different for riding because the first gear is super low, and you find you're doing a lot of what you want to do in the second and third gear at slow speeds, and then in fourth gear is the one that is really where it all starts to get going. It's still fine on the road, it works all right, and it does what I want it to do. It'll happily cruise at 60, and I think with the Michelin Enduro tyres that I've got, I wouldn't really want to go much quicker than that, especially with the lower pressures that I'm running around here. So we've got the Kove ECU, which I took out, and I got the USA DCAT ECU from Kove UK. And then John Stone at Kove UK was really kind and sent me an HP Corsa exhaust to try out, which he said, give it a go. If you don't like it, send it back, which I thought was really generous and kind. I did pay for it, but incredible service and very, very trustworthy. So yeah, put the Corsa exhaust on, and it's a full titanium DCAT exhaust, and it really has transformed the bike. So we've got the USA DCAT ECU and we've got the Corsa DCAT and exhaust, so it's really feeling quite nice now and a lot smoother. You can feel that that fueling is much richer right down at the bottom end, and certainly for slow stuff in the UK like what we do, we're not doing desert rallies, we're not going flat out, we're doing quite low speeds, so we need that lower end tractability, that ability to ride the bike at the lower end of the rev range. So I'm really happy with what it's done so far. So I think I've got quite a few films in this bike because I'm doing with this bike what I really wanted to do with the 890, and that is turn it into a bike that I can do roadbook events with, I can do the navigation, but also I can do some slightly more challenging off-road terrain with my fairly mediocre skill level. So in terms of the things I've added to it, I was really keen to get a DMD navigation tablet. So I went for the Thork racing version, the T865X, and installed that onto an Uncle Wang's Type B rally tower, and I think both of those justify some extra time in a different film because the experience with those is quite incredible. Part of the reason I've done it is because my eyesight is now 55 years old and I really can't see my Garmin Montana GPS, so I thought it was a good idea just to change it and get something bigger. But the reason I did it was the functionality and the ability to easily manage GPX routes and the navigation side of it. It also has the roadbook feature as well, so you can have electronic roadbooks, and we have quite a few events around here which are electronic roadbooks, so I really wanted to get into that. Now my riding is at a level I can probably cope with those events. So I've done that, and we'll have a little look into those. I would have preferred to have kept the rally tower to show the build, but actually I don't think we need to show the build because it was pretty straightforward, but we'll have a look at it anyway. And then the big job that I did, which was probably one of the most stressful things I've ever done, was changing the decals on the bike. So I got the decals from Konrad Motokonnection, which I really like. You get some funny comments online about them, but I think they're really cool and look really good. So I took the original decals off and spent a day putting the new decals on. Pretty tough job, quite stressful. Each piece was just really incredibly stressful, but the end result, I think you can see, I think it looks really good. So changing the graphics on this bike is really easy, and you can personalize it to make it the bike you want it to be. Right, let's have a little look around this thing. So the good thing is it's covered in mud, which is excellent, but I think it's a really good looking bike. So this is the low version, and I'm 173 centimeters tall, and it still feels pretty tall for me. So starting at the front, we've got the Uncle Wang's Type B rally tower, which went together absolutely beautifully, and an absolute dream. To go with that, we've got this slightly higher rally screen on it, which is needed if you're putting a reasonable sized tablet and tower on it as well. And we'll come round to here. I got the steering damper from Uncle Wang's. Personally, I could really feel the lack of a steering damper when I first got the bike, so that has made a big difference, and I'm quite impressed with that. Also got rid of the fuel condensation system and put these on, which actually look pretty cool. and get rid of all that piping, which I think was a bit messy really. Here to the handlebars, we've got the foam grips, which are a bit more comfortable, and then we've got the tablet mounted there as well. It all fits really well, all the angles line up nicely, the original TFT lines up nicely with it. I think it's really very good. And then I've got the Thorpe Racing DMD controller on the handlebar, and that was actually pretty straightforward to put on. The only issue is you have to move the wing mirror mount down the handlebars a little bit for it all to fit, and that does mean you have to drill a hole under here, but again that was pretty unemotional and worked pretty well, so I think that fits really nicely there. I added the rally seat, which is sort of like a suede type of texture. That's really nice, quite nice, but probably not for winter use. It gets a little bit wet, but it's pretty good. And then we've got that exhaust, which is getting muddy. Put on a heat protector for the luggage. And then the only other thing I did was bought a clutch cover, which is the Camel Adventure one. What I'd read was that the ones with the sight glasses actually stick out quite a lot more and can impinge on your boot when it's on the foot peg down here. So this one doesn't come out any further, but what it does have, you can't see the oil, but there's a little screw here which you undo, and if the oil's at the right level you get some oil coming out of that. And then the only other thing I've done is tyres. So I put some Michelin Enduros on, which I'd never used a tyre like this before, never used anything like this on the 890, and it's a road legal Enduro tyre, and I'm really enjoying it. It's very, very different, and it's getting used to the fact there is more grip there. It's quite astonishing. So yeah, really pleased with that tyre. Great bike, loving it so far, and I think there's huge potential for loads of adventures on this. Right, let's get back on this bike and get going somewhere. Let's go down this one, I think. One thing you do find on this bike is the ABS resets each time you turn it off, so you've got to remember to reset that ABS, otherwise the ABS just kicks in with all this stuff, which quite entertaining. So much more confidence inspiring than the 890, which I did love as a bike. I do miss that bike, but something about the lightness of this which is really rewarding. And as I said, you know, I don't come from a bike background, so for me this is all new. Horse turd. So it's not quite Colorado or Spain, is it really, this, in terms of off-road, but it is still quite good fun. The only problem with coming out on your own is that you don't get any more interesting shots unless you stop and set up a camera, so apologies if these shots get a bit boring, but so I must say the exhaust does seem relatively loud. I do like it, and it has done what it's meant to do for the fueling, but it might be a little bit antisocial for some people. And this has got a fun little lane, quite narrow, quite steep, quite a tight turn at the top. Rev it too much going past people's houses. coming up to a straight bit here on the road. Just thought I'd give you an idea of what it sounds like. But it sounds pretty good. Really nice engine. It's starting to rev a lot more freely now. Suspension's been quite interesting. So at the start, the suspension is really stiff and quite jerky. And the advice is to dial it all the way back to zero on pretty much everything, and then gradually start adding turns on, and that just allows the suspension to soften up. And it really has. What you notice when it's all dialed down at the start is that you get quite a lot of oscillating, but you just got to sort of almost put up with it to break the suspension in a bit. And I could be talking absolute rubbish there, but that's what it felt like. I have gone through this before, so I know it's okay. Well, that's fun. Really soft in the middle there. Quite wet. Fortunately the bike didn't go all the way under. As I said, you know, I'm no expert at this. This is me just learning how to do stuff. Let's go up here and keep the engine going. I've actually got water inside me. Fun. That is a lot of water. Wow. Well, it's certainly a mucky bike now. That's good. All good. Right, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I got a bit more than I bargained for. That puddle was deeper and had a lot more soft mud in it than it had before. Surprised me, lack of skill, lack of practice, but hopefully it's quite funny to watch, and the bike's still okay. As far as the bike goes, I am loving it. It's really good fun to ride. It's very different to the 890 Adventure R, just because of the difference in weight, but also the fact it's that single cylinder. And I keep saying it, I'm not an experienced rider. I've been riding off-road for 3 years, and this is the first single cylinder bike I've had. So it is a slightly different learning curve. There's a lot more engine braking, there's a lot more going on there, and also no real electronics on this. There's nothing going on in terms of traction control, but that makes it feel more immediate, it makes it feel fun, but it also makes you feel a bit more attached to the bike. So I'm enjoying it. I'll update more videos as we go through. Hope you enjoyed this and look forward to seeing you on the next video.